slides.
Okay, so let me give you, I'll give you, how rude, pardon me. I'll give you co-host, which I didn't do yet. I said I would, but here it is.
Yeah, I'd love to share. Oh yeah, I gotta wait until host disable participants screen sharing. So as soon as you enable it, then I can share my screen.
You should be good to go. So
let me pull up this. Yeah. All right. Let me see if I can get it from the beginning. Right. Am I doing this right? From current slide? There we go. Can everybody see my slides?
You're golden. Yep.
Awesome. So yeah. I'm free to just start and start.
Well, I'd like to do a brief introduction, and so
cool. Yeah.
Okay. So welcome to Widen Your Gaze Fridays. Wow. Okay, let's try that again. Widen Your Gaze Fridays, take 2. Welcome to Widen Your Gaze Fridays. I'm Luc Bouchard, and I'm so glad you could be here today. I'm very excited about our guest speaker, who is Wendy, and Wendy is going to be sharing about how to lead through a pandemic. But I just want to tell you about the quality of speaker that we have today. And Wendy is an executive coach, and she's passionate about leadership of women, especially women of color. She specializes and coaches clients in various levels of management, including executive and C-suite levels. She is certified DISC facilitator, and Wendy holds a BA from the college, or BA, and I don't even college it. I'm gonna get you to pronounce this. Anyway.
From Colgate.
Oh, that's Colgate. You see, there's my LD coming through right there, right? And you have a master's in education, correct? Is that right? That's probably what's behind you over your shoulder, right? One of those.
Yeah, master's in education and an M.P.A as well, master's in public administration.
Right. And so I'm very excited about Wendy being here today, and I also want to thank Veronica for the introduction. Veronica was also a previous speaker on Widen Your Gaze Fridays, and she also talked about leadership. And the reason I find Wendy's topic today so pertinent is that we're really in this place of change. Nothing, change is the only constant. Yes, that's true. But really, we have accelerated change. And I think the mature and the seasoned professional, the seasoned leader, is going to really stop and take stock right now and say, so how is the world different? How is it the same? And really, I think the empowered leader is the one that's going to go, how do we basically all come together? And that's what I think Wendy's going to, I know that's what she's going to bring today. And without further ado, I give it over to Wendy. So take over.
Thank you, Luke. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I even appreciate it more because it's an intimate group. And so the first thing I want to say is that as much as I am a facilitator, I really pride myself in terms of facilitation as well as coaching in the training spaces, creating an interactive environment. So I do have a ton of slides because the trainer in me always wants to over deliver, but I also want to make sure that I make this an engaging conversation and that we are maybe just, I don't think everybody's on camera, but for those of you who are, please, chime in, unmute yourselves, as well as pop some of your comments into the chat box, which is not right now visible for me. I have to actually hit it. But Luke, I'm going to ask if as a co-producer, you will support me and if there are questions and things like that.
I've got the chat, yes.
Awesome. So let me.
Depending on the time, I'm taking them to.
And I also play the whack-a-mole role where if people are talking, I'll just mute them for you, so you don't have to worry about that. I'll be on top.
Perfect. Okay, so the first thing is many of you are here for these particular outcomes, and so Luke and I talked about the planning of this webinar, and this webinar is really targeted for people who are leaders of teams. But I think if you're an individual contributor, you're going to get some stuff out of it as well, right? And my goal when I have outcomes in a training or in a webinar is to really try and hit all of these 4 areas. So I'm going to be talking about all 4. Like, what do we have to be doing? We are living through a pandemic. As we know it. And so what do we as leaders and leaders of teams have to be doing in order to make sure that we're motivating our staff so that they're remaining inspired with us? What are we doing for ourselves ourselves to make sure that we don't avoid the burnout, right? Because when you are leading teams, leading organizations, that is sometimes inevitable with the volume of sort of work that we have coming our way. How do you build trust and resilience with your team in a virtual environment? And then last but not least, what are some of the ways we can really sort of create more effective communication strategies? So those are the 4 key target areas that I'm going to be speaking to. And along the way, I'm going to be seeking to stop and hear from you in terms of what's working for you all, what's not working, and if some of these suggestions and strategies that I see and have rung to be true in my sort of experience also have worked for you. And so Luke just did a nice overview, but again, this is I have a 20-year career in education reform. I'm currently working at a national nonprofit called New Leaders, and I oversee their entire professional development infrastructure. And in that role, I have about 150 staff members. And so I basically coach those individuals. I work with them from performance management perspective. I also support the managers and having the conversations with their staff members. So there's a lot in that realm. And on the side, I also do executive leadership coaching for women of color. So this is a body of work for me that is a huge passion. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you today. And so in terms of norms for engagement, again, I want to make sure that you are all present with me. I think we're together for about another hour and 15 minutes or so. Again, mute yourself when you're not talking, ask questions, and please be willing to share the learnings. I know that many of you come with levels of expertise, and so I would love to share the platform in terms of what works and what you're bringing to the table. And so the first thing that I wanted to sort of get us all normed around is that right now leaders are dealing with these top, I think there are about 9 challenges. And what they are as we're leading in this pandemic world is that people and our staff and sometimes ourselves are feeling greater levels of fear, stress, and anxiety. Some of us are not always as adept when it comes to the virtual workspace. We're having to manage our time differently. Now we are working from home, so we have encroachment of the work-life balance, right? Like you can literally wake up from the morning, and if you don't have already a morning ritual, you can just start your work with your pajama pants on and a good shirt and keep going. Right. And so how do we time manage now and separate between the work and lives when we're living here in our homes? How do you manage staff remotely? Like you can't really see them. Are people doing what we say they're doing? Right. And so we'll talk a little bit about the building trust. We have people at different levels with ease in terms of understanding in technology. Not everyone, just because we went virtual, is now a virtual guru. So we have to have some level of compassion with that and understanding that not all our staff really even know how to sort of navigate Zoom and, be a co-host and where's the chat. And so we've got that as well. We have people who are worried about whether or not they're going to be have jobs, right? Whether some people have been let go, some people have been furloughed, are they going to come back? So, or is that imminently going to happen to me? And you also have the state of the world with people just becoming ill as a result of the pandemic and as well as other reasons. And then the whole just business disruption, like fundamentally, this pandemic really thrust us into thinking about how we have to manage our businesses differently so that we're able to do this work. It cannot be business as usual. And so that's one of the first things that leaders had to really sort of take stock of when we were thrust into this in March. Like, what were the things that we had to do as leaders in order to continue our businesses? So this is no easy feat, no easy thing to do, and also lead. Right. So these are the top challenges. And before I start to really move into a strategy discussion, which, would be the easiest thing for me to do, I want to just kind of get a sense from my audience right now. What have been some of the ways, given these challenges that I have just shared, or maybe you have some of your own, what are some of the ways that you've been managing through some of these challenges given the pandemic? And I just want to open up the floor for those of you who are on camera. Anyone can just speak.
Hi, Wendy. It's Samir Chandran. I think your comment about being a little bit more forgiving of people's technical expertise or just comfort level with video presentations and the idea of this shift taking place, because it kind of just happened like that.
Yeah.
And we went from one way to another way, and some people were a little bit more familiar with it. Everybody was kind of caught by surprise. So I think when we approach this, we have to understand, like when we manage any team, not everybody has the same learning curve, not everybody has the same base knowledge, and everybody's working from a different perspective. We don't know what the challenges are in their homes. If they're not going to share it with us, they can't, shut the door and go do whatever they're going to do, or go to the office or whatever. So there's a lot more, contingent factors that take place. And I think, as a leader, or even as a team member, you have to feel comfortable sharing that with your management. And as a manager, you have to be more sensitive and understand that, these are unusual situations. It could become the new normal. It could not be. We don't know. But you can't hold it against the person if they're dealing with some external challenges.
Yeah, beautiful. And I have to say that that's spot on. I think that this pandemic is really leading a lot of leaders to think about their leadership style, or should be thinking about their leadership style differently. Like this notion of like command and control, and I need to be able to see everything you're doing, and micromanagement. That is not the way to go in a pandemic, right? And that is not, as we talk about this, going to engender greater trust with your staff, right? And so this Simha, is that how you pronounce your name? That's what I see here, Simha. What I hear you speaking to is sort of like this empathetic leadership model that is really sort of emerging and taking shape in this pandemic. And I think it's going to be something that we need to see more of leaders as we're doing this work, versus this sort of command and control micromanagement style, which really, I don't know how effective it was before a pandemic, although there are people who choose to sort of employ that as a strategy. But now more than ever, we need more grace, compassion, and we need more of an understanding. And also to what Simha was saying, the notion of letting people know. And so these are some of the themes that are gonna keep coming up. And so thank you, Simha, for taking the lead to share a little bit of some of the challenges and how people have been dealing with it. And so some of the things that I see with regards to motivating staff is really also from a leadership perspective. And when you're leading a team, it is really the frequent communication part, right? And so it's almost like over communicate. Like people in a pandemic are uncertain, they're unsure, they don't know what they don't know, but you're a leader and might potentially know a little bit more. And so I think it's important for you to keep your team in the loop. Right. And the other thing that Luke and I talked about when we were sort of planning for this webinar is this notion of vulnerable leadership. So right now we're hearing empathetic leadership, but also a little bit of vulnerability. As leaders, we have been trained, I think, to really operate from a performance orientation where, we know everything. And that's not true. We just don't. We don't know everything. And I think it's important for us to be able to, in that communication to our staff members, be able to share what we know and what we don't know. Right. So here's what we're able to tell you within the next 3 to 6 months. This is the state of the business. This is what we expect. Here's what you can hear from, here's what you can expect from us as an organization. And there may be questions that they ask that you don't know, and it's okay to say you do not know. Right. And so I think that is something that we need to start pulling the Band-Aid off, this notion that you absolutely have to know all the answers, because we just don't. I think another important piece with regards to really motivating staff is this notion of having a regular cadence of checking in with staff. Particularly when you're working virtually, we can't afford to not just have any touch points with people, right? We need to know that people are still doing the work, that people are still engaged, that people are still inspired, that people are still interested. And how do you know that if you don't see them, if you don't connect with them? So I'm going to, in just a short moment, share sort of what I think is an important check-in framework process. But checking regularly with people is super important. Another way right now during the pandemic for us to really ensure that we're motivating staff is acknowledge your staff and appreciate them for what they're doing. Shout them out in team meetings, which means you have to have team meetings, right? So it's not just the one-on-one piece, it's also making sure you're bringing your team together. And then also like have informal communication channels. Like Slack is wonderful. Slack is taken up like a fire in this pandemic in terms of people using it. It's sort of an instant messaging, and it's another way that people can stay connected and less formal, right? We have in my organization, we have a informal Slack channel, and people post pictures of their kids, they post pictures of what they're doing, and it gets people motivated to stay connected, right? Because we are not in front of one another anymore. We don't have the water cooler conversations. Then there is this notion of just really showing people that you care, right? Like before you check in on the work, check in on the person, right? Like it's important for you, like, how are you doing? How are things going? What are the things that you need some support around? So I'm really, really elevating this notion of a compassionate leader, of an empathetic leader. And I don't want people who be like, oh, I'm going soft on my leadership. It's actually not. It's not about going soft on the leadership. It's actually really showing a side of humanity that is so necessary right now, because people are scared. People are in vulnerable spaces. And as Simha mentioned earlier, we have no idea what's going on behind the scenes in people's homes. So if they're going to make the commitment to be with you and to work with you and to spend the number of hours they're working with you and your organization, then it's important that we reciprocate in terms of of being caring leaders. And as well as, I think it's also important that we have team norms. When you bring teams together, you should have sort of a regular cadence of not only how frequently you communicate with your teams, but also like what are the norms for communicating as a team, right? Like, and we usually have those in my organization. It's like I kicked off this webinar with norms for engagement, right? And so, but norms for a team could be like equity voice, having an equity-centered mindset, or presume positive intent, or make sure you activate active listening, or presence. Like we want to make sure we turn on our cameras so we can all see each other. Sometimes people don't want to be on cameras, and so that's a sign that maybe something is there and you want to check in with that staff member later. But the point is, there's an opportunity for you to also build ways to come together in the virtual space from a team norms. I'm just going to pause there, because I know I shared a lot. If there are any questions or comments about these sort of motivating staff tidbits.
I have one, but I want to give other people an opportunity before I do that. So I'm just, so just unmute your microphone and okay, well, I don't see anyone doing that, unmuting, so I'm going to go. And so two things that come up for me, Wendy. One of the other additional challenges that that I'm particularly looking at, and I didn't realize I've been self-isolating for the last 7 years, having a home-based business. Like, it's just kind of normal for me. What's not normal is homeschooling my kids. And then having to come home. So, my son who's in high school in grade 11 is just basically, you're for your classes and you leave. You're not allowed to have your locker's not used. You have to eat lunch in the hallway or your classroom, and then you have to get out. So that means he'll be coming home soon and he'll be here. And so, it does cramp my style when he's at home. So that's something on top of that. But that aside, the other thing I wanted to hear you weigh in on, and just your thoughts, is the idea that, what is it, 50 million Americans out of work right now? Mm-hmm. Do you see that this might give leaders license to be badly behaved, because we'll just find someone to replace you? There's lots of people out of work out there. So I could see, the ones that come from an ethical place, from a place of what I would call excellence, or of really wanting to have that cohesion within the team, that are not power over, that are really about power, in empowering people on that. That's great. But there's also a whole bunch of leaders out there, as we know, who would see this as, there's lots of people who take your job and get people twice as qualified as you to do this job. So do you have any thoughts on that? That's
abuse. Okay, that sounds,
yeah.
That's abusive, and it's tyrannous, and to me, it goes against the very framework of what leadership is, right? The very definition, if you're touting your power in that way. And so I think in a situation like that, it's incumbent on a CEO or and that's a tricky one, right? Because that feels like a whistleblower one, right? Like how would a person who's being subjected to that be able to then share that in a safe space? And so I can tell you from my standpoint in my organization, I am considered a safe space individual. Like I am that person that people would come to. And so I think it's important organizations have folks on their teams or within their organizations where someone can say, hey, I'm being treated in this way and I need some support on how to manage to that, right? And then if those trends keep percolating and popping up, then something needs to be done about addressing that behavior, because that's actually the opposite and the antithesis of what we should be seeing. In fact, people should be really trying to re-recruit their keepers, right? Because we don't know the people who are unemployed right now, just because, like you just said, there are hundreds and thousands and millions of people, but we are looking for particular skill sets, we're looking for particular capacity. And so the notion that you can be easily replaced, that's terrible. That's creating even greater anxiety for all these people who already have all of these issues. So shame on that leader, and we have to find a way to get them out versus, you know, the other way around. So what I would say is I think for those of us who have, who are in leadership roles, and be mindful of that behavior. If you see it, like the New York City slogan, say something. If you see something, say something. And hopefully your organizations have the right structures where people will be able to sort of get the support they need when it comes to that, because that's kind of abusive, I would say.
I also, if I may make a comment to Wendy and to Luke, I think the issue then becomes, given the stresses that we're facing in this particular time, those cracks in the management operations and philosophies will reveal those people that are not adapting or are weak in the areas that we had just mentioned. And you know, they could be sowing the seeds of their own removal based on the fact that they are not producing teams or delivering results because they can't manage in the new normal, and it's revealing their shortcomings as managers in general. Because you know what Luke described is a bad manager to begin with, and if the bad manager is in another situation which accentuates his bad management skills, then there's no point in keeping the bad manager.
Right, and I think that, thank you, Simha, and I think you know, we also have to, those of us who are in roles at a C-suite level, when we are experiencing bad management, I think it's important to intervene quickly and swiftly and not allow that to sort of just fester and continue, because to your point, it does create a domino effect on the teams, on the productivity of people. And we want the opposite effect. We want people who, despite the fact that we are in a pandemic, that people are feeling inspired, motivated, they still want to work for us. We don't want to create this sort of fear of, you know, if you don't do your job, or if you don't, you know, if you have a little snafu, or if you're struggling with something, I can easily replace you. We really want to move more toward that supportive a model of leadership that I think is so important in this climate. And so I'm going to keep going because I have a ton of slides and things I want to talk about. But the next slide is really an opportunity for me to, this is just a sample check-in framework. I was talking about the importance of what did I just do? I hit something and let me just, technology. Woohoo, let's go back. Let me put you guys over here. Let's see. Nope. No, is that it? No, I'm moving it way too. All right.
I just love this when that happens to me. I get lost in my slides.
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh no, it keeps moving. I don't know if it's I don't know if I may need to get off camera. I'm trying to get back to the wheel, and there's a little bit of a delay. This is the beginning. These are the norms for engagement. This is top impact. All right, and no. All right, guys, patience, because I think the slides are gonna. Let me see. This is the slide, but it keeps jumping.
Huh.
There we go. There we go. All right, so this is a check-in framework, which I use in my management training program. And so this is fundamentally what I encourage my managers to do. So when we get into conversations with staff, it's not just about, hey, how are you? I hope all is well, you know, which we do want to do, right? I did say earlier, check in on the person. But one of the ways in which we understand if people are actually doing the work is we have a check-in framework, and we ask the questions. And so this is sort of a just process of what the engagement looks like when you're having what I think is an optimal check-in conversation with a staff member, so that we know that they're doing the work, we understand that the work is being produced, and you're having, as we call my work series, having conversations that matter. And so the first thing is you're going to check in on the individual. Like I said that at the beginning, and then you're going to just start conversations where you're going to be reviewing the deliverables. What are the performance to goals that the staff member is supposed to be engaging in? You want to give them an opportunity to share updates. You want to be able to address questions as a leader, right? You also want to incorporate feedback. Feedback is one of those things that we only do, in my experience, when there's something negative to say. And that then becomes the thing that happens, that then feedback is something people backpedal from. They don't like to give it because there's this negative connotation with it, because oftentimes feedback is only given when it is developmental. No, no, no. Feedback should also be given when we have something positive, right? And I think it should be two-way, right? Like you open up the floor as a leader for you to receive feedback from your staff member, and you also get feedback from your staff member. So it's two. It's you give it to them and you receive it from them. And it's an opportunity to talk really about what's working in this project, what's not working, and then motivating and recognizing them for the work that they're doing well. But also your role as a leader is going to be to provide that support, that guidance, particularly in those areas that are not working. And then you end these conversations with defining expectations in terms of, okay, so moving forward, here are the next steps, right? So this is pretty much a framework which I use with my managers and leaders to remind them that this is how you should be having conversations to ensure there's engagement with your staff member and ensure that they are doing the work and that you're creating that rapport and relationship, which is such an important part of the trust building factor, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Any questions on this model or framework? Do any of you have your own ways of conducting check-ins? Does this resonate with you? Just wanted to see how this is landing over there. All right.
I'm going to make two comments.
Go ahead. I'll jump in.
Yeah, please do.
It's just too bad that that we didn't meet several years ago when I used to run teams. I have a business for myself, and so basically it's just a couple people. But when I was when I worked at Boeing and was a director there, I always tried to practice the stuff that you're talking about. Trying to give feedback in such a way that it was receptive. Not all the times it was. And
that's okay too.
But also encouragement. And try to do that in a way where a person felt safe. And so those would be my comments.
Yeah, and I think that is a great observation, Russ, because I think feedback is one of those things that does require some skill and some art. There is even a timing to it, right? Like I've been doing this work for quite some time, but I've had my own snafus with feedback, and you have to live and learn, right? And there are tons of models, but I think the important thing about feedback is another piece is timing, right? If something happens and you don't address it immediately, then you're letting time go by, and then you're increasing the propensity for that same behavior to happen again. And so that's why if you incorporate it in a check-in framework, you normalize feedback. Like, let me tell you what I saw this week, what happened during this project. Here's, and again, open yourself up. This is that vulnerable leadership part that I'm talking about. So that way your staff members are seeing that you also are open to receiving feedback. And those are interesting conversations, because oftentimes staff members are very much like, no, I don't have anything, you're doing great. And so but the more you normalize the feedback, the more you'll get folks to likely, not always, say, I'd love some help on this, or I noticed this, and that's their way of giving feedback, right? And so you accept that and receive that. But that's a great observation. And I, even in an organization such as mine, where we're constantly teaching leadership, feedback is the thing that people sometimes are a little scared to get involved in. But I think it's important for us to ground it in a check-in, so that way it's just there. All right, so let's keep moving. Let's see if my slides are going to act. Okay, so then I also wanted to address an organizational lens, which I think is important. The other thing during a pandemic that I think at an org-wide level that can be helpful in terms of motivating staff is that we have to be able to provide resources that support them, right? Like with the pandemic living. So some best practices I've seen is some organizations create like an internal intranet site where they have tools and resources, right? Like, what is it like to, as Luke was sharing earlier, working from home with children? What is it going to be like for work-life balance? Do you have an employee assistance program? Are there ability for you to take some flex hours, right? And I think at the organizational level, you want to ask your executive team to take a regular sort of internal scan of this team. It's going to help you anticipate what the needs are. And I think another thing that we did well is to really have organizational wide meetings, like bring people together in a virtual setting so that you know what is, so that they know, right? What is the sort of state of the organization. We also did stuff like create rapid response teams. So again, not all organizations have the resources and capacity to do this, but if you can, it is important for you not to act as if pandemic living is not a thing, right? It cannot be business as usual. And now we're hearing people use the term the new normal. And so we all have to adapt to the new normal. And so these are some of the ways that I think from a broader, at a higher level, that the organization can also help support motivating staff. Let's see if I keep moving these slides in the right direction. All right, nope. Oh boy. Let's keep moving. All right, so now I'm going to transition into the burnout conversation. If you notice, that was a second goal. And so oftentimes for us as leaders, we really, we have a lot on our plates. We are multitasking. We have, we can be entrepreneurs, or, we have families. We have multiple projects in the air, or we have multiple staff members, or our business is in distress. Like, there are signs, right? And I think the first part of burnout is really understanding what those signs are and asking yourself, like, it's almost like, let me check in with me. Right. And so some of these are sort of the quintessential questions and signs that start to show up as leaders when we're in the burnout zone. And they're really, I'm not going to go through all of them, but really they are fatigue, right? Like changes in our physical habits, like insomnia. Have we been impatient? There's more of a propensity now to complain more often than not. Are we becoming cynical? And are you generally not feeling well, right? So those are signs of burnout. And I think, as leaders, we have to take stock of when we are demonstrating these signs and start to do something about them. Because if we are not at our sort of best or at our optimal state, as we have all heard, you can't sort of fill from an empty cup, right? And so if our cup is empty, we're not able to really do the work at scale and lead the organizations or the teams in the way that we would want. And the other piece I wanted to just look at are, what are the causes of burnout? And so it just doesn't happen, right? There are things within our work environments that cause us to feel this way, or that start to have these effects on us. And sometimes they are toxic and dysfunctional work settings. Sometimes what I see a lot is that there's an unclear job expectation. There are people in the pandemic, and we have to be careful as leaders of other team members, that if we don't have the right amount of resources, that we don't oversaturate particular staff members, especially our stronger staff members, with too much work. That is the opposite of what you want to do. Like, as I said, re-recruit your keeper. You don't want to give your highest your employee who is your star employee, all the work that from others that may not be, because you're going to burn that person out. Or if they have unclear expectations about their work that they normally do just because they can do it. That's another thing I see. Sometimes people get delegated a responsibility because they have the capacity and the skill set and can do it fast, even though it's not necessarily within the context of their role. We as leaders have to be careful about that, because we will be encouraging even burnout in our staff. Sometimes burnout happens, again, that's just piggybacking, because we don't have the right resources, not the right number of people to do the work. And then there's also the issues around the overall lack of sort of work-life balance. And then, you just have people, as again, Simha said earlier, if you're having concerns, you have to speak up. And some people are just like, they don't believe anything will change. And so nothing will speak up. And so what we get is the physical manifestations of burnout, which was the earlier slide. And so what I think is super important for us as leaders when we're thinking about how do we counter this is really another piece in this empathetic sort of compassionate leadership framework that I'm sort of sharing with you all, is that you have to recognize as a leader when you need help, when you need support, right? Like, again, this notion that, that's why leaders have teams and they have executive members and they have those individuals who are consultative to them to support them during their time of need and to help them lead the organization. You can't be flying this plane by yourself, right? Pilots have co-pilots, and they have a whole sort of group of individuals who are going to help support the entire wing of the passengers. And so again, it requires you to understand what your signs are and get the support. And also, again, leaders should be self-affiliating with other communities, forums, organizations. What can you join to help support you that's like-minded and similar-minded? And something that I am still learning is these self-care rituals and routines, because I am an ambitious individual, and I often, as coaches, we often have to, what's the word? My coach always says, we often have to learn what we teach. And so the self-care routines and rituals one is one that I admittedly still struggle with, but I think it's important that we have some self-care rituals and routines, and that we have mechanisms to break away, and that we have an accountability partner, because you know yourself best, and you know that oftentimes you're going to break a lot of the rules that you sort of set for yourself when it comes to that kind of stuff. I also think it's important to hire a coach. Get someone who's going to hold you accountable, and who absolutely knows what they're doing and can ask you the right questions, can sort of help you discover those blind spots and get you on a path of really being more empowered versus the burnout plot. Then there's some simple ones, like step away, honor your vacation. I know people who are on vacation who work on vacation. That defeats the point of a vacation. Right? And so that is a problem, right? If you are working, and who is telling you to do that, right? That's the other thing. Like, no one is telling you to do that. That is not legal. You should not be working on vacation. And so if you are working on vacation, that is because you are now in a complete and utter mindset burnout zone. And so you're feeling like you can't walk away or step away. And what will happen is you will even get further ill. And the last one, which I think is a little bit controversial given our pandemic, and that oftentimes I encounter when I have conversations with clients, is if all else fails, you have to know when to leave an environment that does not serve you. And so the reason why I say it is controversial, it is because we are in a pandemic. And so speaking to what Luke was talking to earlier, oftentimes when we are in a pandemic and we are hit and bombarded with all of the news and media that we're bombarded with, we do fall into that sort of a mindset of scarcity where I've got to hold on to what I got, even if it's not the best thing. And so I just, I gently push, because that's my role as a coach when I have clients and people who raise that to the surface, to help them understand, like, how long, if you stay in this environment, what are going to be the long-term consequences? What are even the short-term consequences? And I think there is this conception that because we are in a pandemic, that there are not organizations that are hiring, that are not other places that you might go that might better serve you and might be better aligned from you from a cultural perspective. And so it's just putting one foot in front of the other and starting to make the steps in the direction of what you want to do versus what you think you're not capable of. So you really want to try and get people to see, I mean, you as an individual, again, if you're in an environment that doesn't serve you, it's about creating an exit strategy for ultimately, if things aren't changing in the direction that you want them to, then how long are you going to really be there and live in a burnout zone? So I think these are some of the ways in which I talk to individuals and encourage them to avoid the burnout. Any questions on the burnout or any experiences anyone has had on things that have worked for them in particular? Does this resonate with any of you who are out here listening? I see Russ shaking his head, yes. Thank you for the affirmative nod. Yes, Chris.
Hi, your message about avoiding burnout is, I think, awesome, both for both for employees and for leaders. The comment I have is that I'm basically working as like a solo entrepreneur freelancer type. I feel like I struggle with. Well, I try to. My work-life balance is actually not all that great. Unfortunately, it's like not enough as much life as I would like.
Yeah.
And I guess I think it's a comment that just a comment that I have, and my question is, what do you think? Do you have any more comments on this? Is how are we going to say this? Because it's, it seems to be always a sign of imbalance or something's off balance. If the work-life balance is going off, and I can see that. I can see, if I see it myself as a sort of like a solopreneur and freelancer, I sadly have seen this happen with I've seen this happen, seems to be happening with a client's company, sadly, which there's not much I can do, but I just, I see signs of it.
So Chris, let me just make sure I get your question. You're a solopreneur and you have some work-life balance challenges, and I'm going to assume that it's more obviously working all the time and not really having much of a life. And what else can you do to sort of shift that? Is that what you're looking for some guidance and support in?
Yep.
Okay. So the one thing that I think is important for someone who's a solopreneur and who is a little bit hilter-kilter is, what do you want? You first have to identify, like, what do you want to be your sort of work-life balance? Like, is it that you don't have right now ample time to yourself? Is it that you don't have a sort of, I don't know, like an exercise routine? Like, you have to first get present to the want of what is it I want more of? If I'm gonna release the work side part and I want more life, what part of my life do I want to expand? And then as you start to sort of get present to what that is, I don't know if it's more walks in nature, I don't know if it's longer, if it's reading a book, I don't know what it is, right? Then I think you need to enlist someone who you trust, who is an accountability partner, and let them know, look, I'm trying to do this for myself and I need an accountability partner. And an accountability partner is not just somebody you just tell, I want you to be my accountability partner. You actually have to have an enrollment conversation with them, and you have to sort of tell them, here's what I'm up to, here's what I want to do, and here's how often I want to do it. Can you hold me accountable on that? They've got a role too, right? So like if let's say, I'm just out of curiosity, I'm just gonna just throw out, let's say that the accountability, that what you're trying to do is go to the gym 3 times a week, every day at 5 a.m. I'm just throwing it out there. This accountability partner has to be able to sort of, send you a text at 5. Hey, are you up? Are you gone? Are you off? Or if the agreement is after you do the let's say the workout, you text them, right? And so there's got to be integrity on both sides. But I think first you got to get super present to what it is you want on your life side, what it is, and then you have to go create that. And I don't think you like anything, even though this is, like you just mentioned, it has a lot to do with organizations, but as a solopreneur, a lot of this applies. you still need support, right? Like, you know, and so, and I
Definitely.
think we have to be able to move from the solo part and really sort of get to the collaborative part. So part of it is you making the leap over there to really find someone within your team of people who you know who are Chris champions or Chris allies or part of your squad or whatever, you know, your club, your friends, and say, hey, I want to do this. Can you help me with that? And I think oftentimes the asking for support is the bigger hurdle than anything.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so I'm going to move to the next part of the presentation, which is really looking at trust, right? And I want to share, and oh Lord Jesus, let's just keep this. My mouse is very sensitive. So one of the things I want to share is this notion of building trust on teams, and this is a study from the Harvard Business Review, and what they measured was these 3 elements, right? They measured relationships, they measured judgment, and they measured consistency. And so when we're talking about judgment, they're talking about whether or not your staff trust you as a leader, right? How well informed are you? How knowledgeable are you? Do you understand your role as a leader, right? Like, do you make good business decisions? Do other people trust you and seek your opinions and ideas, right? Or do you have the knowledge and expertise to make the decisions that you've been entrusted to? And so that's what sort of the whole judgment piece means. Then there was the positive relationships, and that is another sort of part of the trust index. And it is the notion to which a leader is able to create those positive relationships with their staff and with people and with groups. Do you stay in touch with concerns? Do you show a balance of concern for others and results, right? It's not just the concern part, but the results. Are you generating collaboration and cooperation? Are you helpful when it comes to resolving conflict with others? And are you, as we spoke earlier, giving honest feedback? And then the third element of trust in this study is the notion of consistency. Are you able to walk the walk and talk the talk? Right? And so people are looking to you as a leader, and are you honoring those commitments that you're promising? Are you willing to go above and beyond? And you know, are you just a good example as a leader, right? And so these were sort of the 3 levers. And so one of the things that I think is important as we're thinking about leadership in a pandemic realm is if you just look at this chart, and I don't know how big or small it is on your screens, but if you look at this, it says when all 3 are present, you have a trust percentile of 80%, right? Like it's really, really high. People are feeling like they trust the leader. But I want to drop down to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th, where I'm showing the arrow. And just because what the Harvard Business Review indicated is that when relationships were low, and the judgment and consistency were high, the trust level went down by 33 points, right? And so what that is telling me, and I think it's something that has rung true for me in my career and something that I share a lot with my clients, is that it is so important to cultivate relationships with people, not only across your team for leadership purposes, but even if you're someone right now, this is a little separate conversation, but if you're someone who's looking for employment or looking for a business opportunity, it's not just about, let me see what I can get out of this person. It's around the relationship part. And that is what people are looking for. And people know authentically when you are in that realm of trying to do that. And so I just wanted to, let me keep going on to the next slide, see if there. So this is just a quote from the Harvard Business Review study, where it says that they were curious to know if leaders needed to be skilled in all 3 elements to generate a high level of trust. And then I'm going to jump into the second one. Intuitively, we thought that consistency would be the most important element. Saying one thing and doing another oftentimes seemed like it would hurt the trust lever. But their analysis showed that inconsistency does have a negative impact. But when trust went down, it was relationships that had the most substantial impact, right? So relationships were low, both the judgment and consistency were high, as I mentioned, the trust was down 33 points, which means that this may be because many leaders are seen as occasionally inconsistent. We all intend to do things that don't get done, but once a relationship is damaged, or if it was never formed in the first place, it is difficult for people to trust. So I'm going to stop there because I just want to get some comments and feedback around this trust piece and what are people thinking about as they sort of have managed staff or they've managed relationships. You know, I want to be mindful of Chris's as solopreneur as you sort of work with others. What is this, this notion of a relationship being a key lever to trust resonate with you?
Wendy, I'm just gonna, I want people to ask questions, but I'm not sure if everyone's hearing it, but when you talk, sometimes you're coming across a bit garbled. So it's obviously,
no.
it's just briefly, is it just me or is there other people hearing that too? Just a thumbs up? Yeah. So I would have mentioned it before it was worse, but I'm just letting you know, and it's not here now, so I'm not sure. It might be the signal, but anyway.
Okay.
So I will chime in since I already have my microphone unmuted and whatnot. The thing that I really like about what you're saying is there's a sense of, I think sometimes there can be a sense, there is not a sense, there's a hypocrisy that goes in leadership that's not unlike the hypocrisy with parenting. Do as I say, not as I do. And it's this thing. So when you talk about the vulnerable leader, we want our staff to be vulnerable. We want them to basically go, this is what's getting in my way. This is what's happening. But the question is, are you modeling that to them? Because if you're not going to do it, why would they do it? And so that's why I'm thinking that when you say feedback's a two-way street, I've believed that for many years. If I'm going to basically hold people accountable, then I think there's a certain part of it that I say, so, you know, it comes both ways. So those were the couple of thoughts that I had on that. What about other people who'd like to unmute their microphone and just weigh in on what Wendy's talking about as she works on some of the technology issues? I'm sure she can still hear, so if you want to speak. And Adele, nice to see you. Thanks for coming back. So.
Hi, Luke.
Hey, Summer.
I think the issue that Wendy raised and you raised is relevant, but I think also if you look at how most relationships are developed, right? It's not like you know, you show up and all of a sudden you have a relationship with somebody.
That's right.
It kind of takes effort and work to develop that over time, and it comes about through common interests or a common problem, or you know, whatever, working on an issue together, solving a crisis, whatever. And so you develop a sense of a person's abilities and a sense of who they are. And from that, you get a sense of trust that I can rely on them to do certain things. And then eventually that kind of blossoms into, you know, a good relationship, or a good sense of trust, or a medium level of trust, or I don't trust this person at all. And so I don't know if consistency or those items that were listed were necessarily separate issues in terms of quantifiable real world example, how the real world works. I think it's kind of sort of mixes together, and it's, you know, it's hard for me to pick out, you know, is the fact that they're consistent? Is it that I trust them? Is it we've known each other for 100 years? You know, I think it all just, you know, is one of those combination things that when you start to try to pick apart, may or may not hold up under that kind of analytical scrutiny.
Right, absolutely. And I think the thing that is, if we think about it, how long does it take to build those relationships? Because you're absolutely correct. You don't show up overnight. You don't show up and you have that trust. And you know, there's I see that there's a couple different levels of trust that we have with people. There's somewhat what I would say, you know, we extend trust to people. That's like, yeah, they're going to show up on time. They're going to do the work because that's what they've agreed to. But as we get to know people, you know, we realize that sometimes what people say and what they do, or it's different, and it just takes a long time to get to know someone. So, you know, it always kind of baffles me as to how fast people want to dispose of relationships, when, you know, sometimes it's better the devil you know than the deep blue sea. That idea is that, you know, you may have this person that might have these, you know, things that they need to work on, but that could be a whole lot, you know, if you bring somebody else in new, it could be a whole other thing that's a lot worse on that. What about other people? What are your other thoughts? What do other people have to say? Yes, Adele.
I have a question. So senior people go in at very senior levels, and it's often to make, you know, be a change maker. And so it's very hard to deal like across departments quickly and build these relationships. So I'm wondering if she could give us maybe 3 tips.
And the question is that, so how, so can I have the question again, just to make sure?
3 tips on how to build relationships with people you know are just meeting, who may feel a little threatened because you're coming in at a senior level to be a change maker. Otherwise they wouldn't be hiring you in the middle of a pandemic. So you're doing everything by Zoom. You don't know these people. Some people are going to be threatened. And how do you diffuse but also still get your job done?
Right, and also maintain that level of professionalism and all that kind of stuff. So I see that Wendy's still, I think she's working on some technical issues.
No, I'm here.
Okay. I just
I just took myself. I might not just get on video right now, just to ensure that I improve the quality of the audio, because I think that's important. I'll come back on video if the mute, if the audio starts to work. But so Adele, thank you for your question. And I think one of the ways I have seen that happen and people be effective in sort of, they're coming in as a change agent, they have to make sort of sweeping changes across the organization, and they want to engender trust and get people, and hopefully people are not seeing them as the hammer. And so how do people start to trust this individual? And so I think it's like some of the basic stuff, like, and this might be super sort of basic, but some of the things I would encourage is, first of all, try and some virtual coffee chats with people, like just connecting one-on-one. Like, I think people have forgotten the power of what a one-on-one discussion can do, right? Like, and I have seen that even before the COVID and pandemic, like having conversations with individuals and inviting them to sort of connect and get to understand who they are, what they work, what their views and perspectives are. That goes a long way, because then that person will share that with the next person, will share that with the next person, and then that starts to sort of create this sort of buzz around who you are as a leader, right? But you're not just having it with one person, you're having it with others. And so the other thing I would also encourage is skip levels. Like, even though the person doesn't directly report into you, you skip the level, and you actually, and you have conversations with the staff members of your managers, right? Because usually the people who are most impacted during these change sort of management and org-wide shifts are the people at the bottom, because they don't know and they don't understand, yet they are the ones who are either asked to implement the new changes, they're the foot and the hands for the new changes, and they don't always understand why these changes are happening. So I think if you have skip level meetings, which is literally what it means, which is like, instead of you talking directly with your direct report, you skip the level of the direct report and you go to the direct reports staff members and start to institute sort of a regular cadence of skip levels with them. That is really powerful, because it shows them that the person at the 2 levels below you, it matter, right? Like, you want to hear from me. And as a result of you hearing from me, I'm able to elevate some of the things that are on my heart and on my mind. And I've been with the organization now for 10 years. And this is the first time someone has ever even incorporated me in this type of level of conversation. So I think stuff like virtual coffee chats, skip level conversations, and will go a long way for you to sort of start to build community and communication and relationship, because that's actually the next level of these slides, right? Like, how do we build the trusting relationships?
Okay,
and
on that, I have another question. And
sure.
Other people have questions, you guys go ahead. But so some people in this Zoom situation are hypersensitive. Like, if you get an email, they want a response immediately. And, as a lawyer on significant things, you get like 1 million emails a day. So with the clients, I'm always like, they get an immediate, within 5 or 10 minutes of response. But with the internal staff, I could see not doing that, just because I'm trying to also produce like 200-page documents and things like that. But there's a high sensitivity about immediacy, as if you're not sitting, in my case, it was actually in the office. So how would you handle that?
Well, I think one of the things I spoke about earlier, and I hope you can hear me because I see my audio has a little bit of an exclamation point, so I'm coming in as close as I can to my microphone. One of the things I talked about was team norms and setting up norms and expectations with your team around things like communication. So that if we train people that as soon as we get an email, they're going to hear from us, then that's what people are going to expect. But if you start to train people that, our first point of contact are our clients, and unless this is an urgent email, which you should send with an exclamation point, only then will then I be able to respond immediately. Thereafter, I will respond within the next 24 hours or 40, whatever the case might be. I think it's about communicating expectations around communication to your staff, and then making sure we hold ourselves accountable to that. Because the other thing is, if you create a set of communication norms and then you don't follow them and you continue to respond to emails immediately, then people are going to be like, phooey, we created this, but people are still responding right away. And then you're going to create some unevenness. And some people are going to be like, well, Adele responds to me right away, but Sophia does not. And, and so you get this sort of mixed confusion. So I would say, even though everybody is working at a very urgent pace and there's a lot of work, it's important for you to come together as a team and create some level of team norms and sort of like, here's how we're going to collaborate with one another, which means that from now on in, unless it's an urgent request, I'm not going to write back to you like Speedy Gonzalez, like right away. I'm going to maybe look at it at the end of the day, right? Like there's an expectation you'll get a response from me, and then I'll write back to you. I have up to and including 24 hours. Let's just say that. I don't know what the right amount of time, but I think the team norms piece is the way to go.
Even 3 times a day, but just not this instant thing, because you can't get
right.
Everything. And then this is my last question, and that is, so it's a job related thing, but it wasn't actually the job last night. We're in a meeting with over 35 people and 3 regulators, and I'm talking top federal regulators, and we're dealing with some substantive things. And then the conversation, rightly so, but it had a cadence issue, got taken into a topic of, what are the federal regulators doing about all the social issues that are coming up, which there is absolutely a place for. And I was completely fine with that and all that. And we went through it, but it was unrelenting then. So, and the meeting went over. There was no way to end it because you wouldn't want to appear rude or that you didn't think these issues were important. Mm-hmm. How would you handle that?
Well, I mean, did you guys have an agenda coming in?
I wasn't running the meeting. It was another one that was running it, but I could see them struggling. I was fine, but I'm just curious. I could see this happening to me.
Right. So let me say, if it happens to you and you're running a meeting, I would say come in with an agenda, right? Like make sure you have an agenda and it's timed and people know what the expectations and outcomes are for that meeting. And if there's any pre-planning you have to do with anyone who's going to be co-facilitating with you, you do that in advance of the meeting so that you have sort of what it sounds like. Sometimes people hijack your meeting agenda and it's, you don't know how to sort of redirect, right? But the problem is that from the beginning, there was no set agenda. There was no set sort of outcomes for what we were trying to accomplish. So sometimes others will then come in and hijack the meeting and the intention for the meeting. So I think from your perspective, Adele, if you're seeking to ensure that something like that does not happen, it is easy. It's the preparation that you have to do in advance, right? Like making sure you come in with an agenda, it's timed, what we're going to talk about. And if it goes way, way over, you might find a gentle way to nudge and redirect and say, is there a way, like this is an important topic and I'd love for us to continue the conversation, but I want to make sure we bring us back to the focus of our meeting, which is this. And I think that no one is going to sort of look at that as a sign of disrespect or a sign of you wanting to not hear other voices. It's just that wasn't the intention of the meeting. So you redirect it back to what was the initial outcome.
Got it.
Okay. All right. So I still see an exclamation point on my audio. So I'm gonna just keep going without my video because I think you guys can hear me.
We can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you fine. There is some degradation of your voice that comes through a bit, but it's
sorry.
Yeah. So anyway,
I'm hoping that I can get through it without too much disruption. So let me just, I'm coming in as close as I can. And so in terms of just wrapping up this trust piece, we were talking about how do we build trust? And I think Simha, as well as yourself, Luke, we're talking about, yeah, you just don't come in and it just kind of happens and all of a sudden you have trust. You do have to build it over time. And so this study, and the reason I'm raising it is because I do see that to be the case, right? Like I'm not just talking about something, oh, because it's Harvard, but I do think it's important that as leaders of teams, in order for us to build trust with people, we have to look at what we do, right? And some of it is this swift relational interpersonal thing. People need to feel like you are someone they can talk to and there's a general rapport. Again, earlier in the presentation, I talked about check-ins and community builders and making sure you're acknowledging staff. And then the second lever of trust is the competence piece. Like people will start to trust you as well as, namely your staff members, if they know that you are someone who is competent in the work that you're doing. You can be trusted to do the work that you're doing, as well as you're communicating with a level of predictability. Like don't tell somebody you're going to do something, you're going to get a raise, or you're going to do this, and then all of a sudden you never sort of deliver on that. If it's something that you, as we're speaking of raises and things of that like that in a pandemic, if it's something you've committed to sort of address on behalf of that staff member with the CFO, let them know that you have addressed it and right now might not be the best time, or this is what's coming up for the organization, or we have a hold on these types of on promotions and things of that level. So that way, that's communicating with predictability, right? It's the ability for you to be able to say to a staff member, this is something I promised you, and then going back to sort of keeping them in the loop on what's happening there. And so those are ways in which the trust piece can be built. Let me just keep going here because I think I have one more area. Oh yeah, and then we were talking about the relational trust, and I think I think this touches a little bit on what Adele was mentioning. Like teams can have norms, and I think it's important for them to, in the virtual space, so that way you know how you want to operate as a team and what we come to expect from one another. You can create norms, and these are examples of them. These don't have to be your norms, but as a team, let's say you can tell you want to maintain high expectations. When we work together as a team, we want to be able to demonstrate preparedness. We want to be able to be sincere with one another, learn names. We want to be prepared for the conversations we're going to have. There's a level of reliability and follow through, right? And some of this, we might have the communication piece that Adele was talking about earlier, as well as prioritize practice with actionable feedback, whatever the case that might be, right? Like, I think it's important that we don't value the importance of having some level of norms on how we want to operate as a group. And I think I'm coming in on, and this is the competence-based component, right? Like as a leader, you have to be able to demonstrate your competency, protect the time of your team when you guys are working on important projects, create mutually clear expectations and goals for one another, right? These are all things that a competent leader would do. You lead the team through the process of building and through the support that they need. And you really want to influence, like we were talking about that earlier, you want to focus on the need to control less and really start to ensure you're having check-ins with people and people are doing the work and people are creating the outcomes. So it's more influencing, supporting versus controlling is what you want to do in this, not only in this pandemic, but in period as a leader. I just want to look at the time, Luke. I do have one small other area, which is quick, which is the communication. Do you want me to go through that?
Nope, go. Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, okay. Yep. So then the last piece is really of the goals for today's conversation was effective communication. And one of the things that I have employed as a leader is the DISC tool, which is a behavioral assessment. As Luke mentioned earlier in my opening, that I'm a certified DISC facilitator. And I think it's important to have sort of these assessments to help people understand what are effective means to communicating. Like, this is how I show up when I communicate. This is what I know to be true about you. And so how do we adapt, right? And so it is really, I think, a powerful tool. There are tons of other ones. This right now is really the leading one used for in lots of organizations worldwide. And so it's one of the reasons why I continue to use it. And the other piece is, as a leader, you want to just create the space for open dialogue. And I also talked a little bit about earlier, making sure that if you see something, you say something. You know, you got to practice active listening. And when I say see something, say something, is if you see something in a staff member that's contradictory to who you know that staff member to be, check in on that staff member. Or if you see some behaviors and practices during a team meeting that are sort of undercut or are undermine the values and norms that you have come up with as a team, you don't want to just not acknowledge that as a team, as the leader of that group. You want to be able to address it. You have to find how to address it appropriately, but you do want to address it. And then you want to create an opportunity for you all to sort of collectively commit to practicing these changes. And so, and that's pretty much it. I think effective communication has a lot more to do with asking the questions as well as active listening, instead of always feeling like you're doing all the talking. Right. And I think a real powerful one is do not sweep conflict under the rug. If you are a leader of a team and conflict is brewing and you don't address it, you're just going to get all that backdoor stuff at the end where people are going to be doing the gossipy, the you know, in Spanish we say the chisme, you know, all of that stuff back there that's just not going to be helpful to what we're trying to do as a team and as a collective and as an organization. And so that is it for today. I want to open up the floor for any questions around the trust, the communication, the motivation of staff. I shared a ton of stuff with all of you. And so I just want to make sure that if there are still questions that are resonating for you, and the burnout piece was another area that we addressed, that that we talk a little bit about it. If you can still hear me.
We can still hear you, and the volume, the noise was, it's pretty much gone. So it's all good right now. So yeah, what questions do people have? This has been outstanding information. I have questions, but I have no shortage of them.
Questions,
I know, right? So let somebody else speak right now. What are the questions people have or comments?
Well, I also have some question prompts. Here were prompts that I wanted to give you all for some of the these. So I just there was this is just when so communication is challenging when we're having challenges, right? Like, and so when we're having challenges, what's the right thing to say? And I find that a lot of my staff and managers sometimes struggle with how do they even open the door for approaching the conflict, right? Like I did say, don't sweep it under the rug. So I like to give people just some starter language, which you can absolutely use or do whatever you want, right? Like speak from the heart, as long as you're diplomatic and respectful. But here are some ideas on how you can really move towards a solution when you're having a conversation with someone and you're struggling and you want to sort of create an effective outcome. So these are some of the things that could work.
So one of the other things that, just a comment that, or something I thought of when you were talking about it, and I hadn't heard of this term probably till 2 months into lockdown, and that is Zoom fatigue.
Oh, yes.
And whatnot. And, you know, and it's just like, and then somebody explained it really well. And that was, they said, yeah, I have no time between my meetings to decompress.
Mm-hmm.
I go from one thing to the other, and then it's just like, so it's just, and myself this morning, right? This is my third Zoom meeting. Well, no, I did have half an hour, so I did have a chance to have lunch. But yeah, it's that idea of going to them on that. And do you think that managers are starting to see that as potentially they need to keep that on their radar about, you know, just constantly being on and on and on? You have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think is protect your space, protect your time. Look at your calendar on a Sunday and block out times that I do not schedule. Right. And so if other people have access to your calendar, again, I'm speaking from an organizational standpoint, you will put do not schedule. If you are a solopreneur like Chris is, then, you know, it's about him managing his own schedule so that he can make sure that he's cushioning in between conversations and meetings with whomever and giving himself those breaks. And so as leaders, I think that's the important thing, that we have the capacity, hopefully, to manage our schedules a little bit more so than maybe perhaps others do. And so I think it's important for us to be mindful of that and give ourselves some breathing room versus back to back, and set those expectations, right? Like, I'm offline during this time and you're not going to see me in Zoom. And so people will know, don't reach me during this time. Do not schedule. I think communication is really important during this time because we can't always see each other. And again, you're working from your home, and the level of integrity and sort of trust that you have to have is very high to make sure that I'm paying you and I expect you to do the work. And so on the other end, the way we can grace our staff with them is just letting them know, if you have to be offline for a few, that's okay. You know, and then, you know, let me know. And that way I'm not expecting to communicate with you during this time or think that you've gone ghost on me. And so that's one of the ways, Luke, and then I see Chris's hand up here in terms of a question.
Okay, so I guess in follow up to what you said about making sure that people are actually working and not ghosting on the job. So I guess one thing I'm kind of wondering and think about is that, like, you know, sometimes work can be done by, okay, sometimes work and payment can be measured like either by hourly or by output.
Mm-hmm.
And I get both. Like, I get cases where someone just wants to, you know, company wants to just wants to do it by hourly, and then I have to go track it. But I try as much as I can to just go in terms of output and, you know, like accomplishments and keep up schedule. Then it's just, you know, it's easier. But I guess my question is that can you give any ideas or suggestions, like if a company has people just that are just, you know, that are just literally gone at home, and you know, because of the pandemic, and any suggestions how you know, how management can measure which employees are providing the appropriate output and are available, and which employees are truly slacking off?
Wow. So this is an interesting question because I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I know, like, for instance, there are some organizations that have these tracking mechanisms that they know when people are online. And so I don't know if that's going too far on the extreme, because the people have been sort of going around the way and sort of like, they'll be online, but they're not necessarily working. And so I have to go back to the manager staff member conversation and relationship. Like, I think you as a manager are going to have to really have these conversations with staff members and have like a check-in with them and figure out whether or not, because from those conversations, you can tell if somebody's working or not. Like, if they're not doing the work, they don't have the language of outcomes. They don't have the language of production. And so I think it's super important for managers to stay connected with their staff members and have those, like I said, conversations that matter. So that way the staff member even knows that it's coming up. And so it almost also creates this sort of like, I have to lead that conversation. And that's the other thing that I do when I have these conversations with staff members. If I'm in a check-in with the staff member, I'm not doing the talking. This is your check-in. You're telling me what you're doing. So I'm listening, and I'm going to provide you with some guidance and support on the questions that you need some support on. But if you're doing the work, guess what? You have language that sounds like outcomes. You have language that sounds like production. You have language that sounds like you're in it. And when you're not, then that's very telling too. So I got to take it back to that conversation and that manager staff member relationship And if you do have those staff members who are not able to employ that language of production and outcomes and are not leading their own conversations around their work, then you've got to do something about it, because that's going to create a morale dip in your team, because guess what? That person happens to be getting away with it and I'm working, right? And you want to be mindful of that too. So that's what I mean about sort of scanning your team, kind of like, don't sweep stuff under the rug that you know to intuitively, and maybe not so intuitively, maybe it's really coming up. You got to do something about it. That's why we're leaders.
So I'm just noticing the time, Wendy, and I'm going to,
Yeah.
we're almost done. I do want to talk about my next webinars coming on. So if you could give me back
absolutely.
the screen, that would be great.
And
we're just going to wrap this up and be done close to the end of the half past the hour as possible. So let me just get this.
Thank you for the clap, Chris. I saw some clapping.
Okay, so
I'm just looking at all the chats, team. So I'm so sorry.
It's all good. So let me just. Okay, I will share my screen. No, hold on here. What's going on here? Too many screens. Okay, I apologize. I'm not sure why my screen is not working. There it is. Okay, so now we're going to go and then, yes. So just to go over some of my upcoming webinars that's happening next week. I'm now running my webinars Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays. And next week we have how to have a kick-ass elevator pitch, part 1, the value proposition. And in part 1, we really look at how do you identify what you bring to the table so that when you're in your elevator pitch, people are going to say, yeah, I want to know more, and get them to lean in more. In part 2, we talk about how to create meaningful connections, and I have some very simple models that I use to talk about how to have engagement, meaningful engagement as opposed to fluff, and so that you're not just really filling space, and someone can't wait to get away from that conversation. You're having meaningful connections. And that is next Thursday, the 17th at 1 o'clock. And then for Widen Your Gaze, I have Deanna coming on to speak about the holistic entrepreneur. And she's going to talk about what it means to be a holistic entrepreneur, why you need to be one, and how to maintain the approach. And then the following week, we have Ageism, Navigating the Potential Minefield, and that is on the 22nd. And then 2 days later, we have Becoming a Subject Matter Expert, and that's on the 24th. And then a webinar I've been threatening to do for months now, Communication Fundamentals. And it's really about what is good communication, why does it go off the rails, and what can we do to get back to have good conversation, especially with people that are important to us and the ones that we need to maintain those relationships with. And then the last webinar for September is going to be video interviews and getting out of your own way. And it's really about the do's and don'ts of video interviews so that you're basically not compromising yourself or doing something that's going to make you look bad in the interview. And then it's basically, you're not going to get the traction you want, which is getting a job. So I do have an ask, and that is, if you know of anyone that might have a platform I could speak on, or even Wendy. I know Wendy is looking for, wouldn't mind have other opportunities to speak if I could speak on your behalf, Wendy.
Sure.
And so, yeah, and really connect with me on LinkedIn. Please connect with Wendy on LinkedIn, and she put her information in the chat. And, you know, my final thoughts before we go back to any last questions are, don't try and fit in when you're bored to stand out. We are meant to shine. We are meant to own our space, and we are not meant to shrivel and be afraid of making other people uncomfortable with our power. We are meant to show up fully. So I encourage you to do that. And we will now have a few more minutes to take some last questions with Wendy. So who else has something they want to ask?
Chris is like, I've got a question. Am I still on?
Yes, you are. You're good.
Okay, my speaker is, I can't mute or unmute, so.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, my stuff is messed up. So, but I'm here.
You're good.
So,
I'll let you know. Yeah.
So I'm putting Wendy on the spot. I'm going to really put you on the spot on this one. So the last picture from Luke, don't, what is it? Don't, don't hide when you want to stand out. I butchered it, and I butchered it, but
Show up fully. Show up fully.
show up fully. So any suggestions if and how to encourage employees to is to sort of I'm going to butcher it again, but
To stand out?
to stand out appropriately and not to hide and conform like a chameleon, but to stand out appropriately.
I mean, you've got some stylistic things you have to deal with, right? Like some people are just extroverts and some people are introverts. And so as much as you want to encourage them to stand out, it's not within their comfort zone. I do want to, and you have to honor that to a certain degree, but you might want to ask, like, I noticed that you are really good at this and I can see you really taking the lead on this conversation. What if, you create a safer space for that individual to have maybe lead a conversation in a smaller group, right? So start to give people incremental opportunities for them to be able to start to get comfortable. If you believe it or not, I was actually behind the scenes many years ago on the professional development of the work that I do now, that I'm in the front of the scenes. I had consultants doing the work and the consultants would be like, you have such a commanding voice, you're so good at this. I said, no, you do it, it's fine. And then eventually practice and getting out there and sort of, having my preparation and sometimes not, you just start to sort of get a little bit more ease and comfort. So I think little stretch assignments and opportunities to really give staff an opportunity to start to flex where they have strengths will allow people to stand out and shine. And then you have some people that you're like, woo, they really want the whole sort of platform, and you got to figure out how you want to manage to them so that you're equitable in how you're providing opportunities for your staff members, because people will notice that too. If you always have that same person doing the same thing. So even if, let's say, you run team meetings, you don't always have to, you might delegate things to a certain person. Have one person do the agenda, another person can take the notes, another person can sort of help facilitate a part of the discussion. You don't always have to do all of the conversation piece. But you also want to make sure staff members are prepared to take on the additional stretch in the leadership opportunity. So I would say incremental growth and opportunities for them to demonstrate their strengths, so that way they can start to create greater comfort.
All right.
Awesome.
Okay. I'm actually going to, I do have another meeting I have to get to here, so I am going to ask everyone to, I'm going to close it. I'm going to begin with just say thank you so much, Wendy, for offering your expertise. And clearly you know what you're talking about, and I would have no problem referring to you at all. So
thank you so much, Luke.
yeah.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
And it was a pleasure for me because I mostly connect with women. I had one woman on the call, and I don't know if Veronica was on and off, but I love this conversation with all the men on the call. Thank you so much for bringing all your power and bringing all your questions and really making this engaging for me, because this would have been too boring if I would have just been sitting here talking by myself and not having a chance to hear your perspective. So thank you.
You're welcome. And Veronica, I'm just going to get you to, Wendy, I'm just going to get you to hold on just for 1 second. And I'm just going to say in closing, thanks a lot. You don't have to leave your house, but you can't stay in this room. So,
Right.
Okay. You're very welcome. You take care.
Bye.
Bye.